Civilizations throughout the galaxy had a peculiar habit of measuring their sophistication by how far removed they were from actual violence, as if the ability to discuss warfare in theoretical terms somehow elevated them above the messy business of survival. The Zephyrian Military Academy represented the pinnacle of this philosophy, floating serenely in orbit around Kepler-7 like a monument to the belief that war could be refined into an art form practiced by genteel beings in climate-controlled environments. The Academy's crystalline spires caught starlight with the calculated elegance of a jewelry display, while its hover portals glided through corridors with the hushed reverence typically reserved for libraries or funeral homes. For 3 centuries, this bastion of military excellence had produced officers who could recite the complete works of Sun Tzu in 17 languages, but had never actually seen what happened when theoretical plasma met practical flesh. What they had never produced until recently was a human graduate. This wasn't for lack of trying on humanity's part. Oh no, humans had been banging on the Academy's metaphorical door like persistent salespeople since first contact. The issue was that the Galactic Council had classified Earth as a Class 9 death world, which in polite society translated to that horrible rock where evolution apparently got drunk and decided violence was the answer to everything. The classification wasn't entirely unfair. Earth was the sort of planet where the local wildlife included creatures that could bite through starship hull plating, weather patterns that could atomize lesser species, and gravity that most civilized beings considered a form of torture. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived on this geological nightmare had earned them a reputation as either incredibly resilient or spectacularly stupid. The jury was still out on which. Enter Kira Voss, age 19 standard years, standing 5 feet 8 inches of concentrated human stubbornness, wrapped in a Regulation Academy uniform that had been tailored for species with more sensible proportions. She had arrived at Kepler-7 6 months ago as part of the Terran Integration Initiative, a diplomatic program that sounded impressive until you realized it was basically the galaxy's way of saying, "Fine, we'll let one of you barbaric apes play soldier, but don't expect us to like it." The Academy's student body had received her with all the warmth typically reserved for infectious diseases. Her dormitory assignment placed her in a wing populated by vegan nobles who communicated primarily through interpretive dance and considered breathing audibly to be a sign of poor breeding. Her classmates, a collection of beings whose ancestors had been writing poetry while humans were still figuring out fire, treated her presence as an amusing curiosity at best and a personal insult at worst. Instructor HFY, a 7-foot Altarian whose family tree could be traced back to the founding of the Galactic Republic, had made his position clear during Kira's first tactical simulation. Deathworlders excel at violence, not strategy. Perhaps Cadet Voss would be more comfortable in sanitation maintenance? The laughter that followed had been polite, refined, and absolutely brutal, in the way that only truly civilized cruelty could manage. But Kira had endured worse than aristocratic aliens with superiority complexes. She had survived Detroit public schools, after all. Every morning she attended lectures on multidimensional warfare, while her classmates whispered about her species' barbaric origins. Every afternoon she excelled in combat simulations while they marveled at her primitive aggression. Every evening she studied galactic lore while they placed bets on how long she'd last before dropping out and returning to her savage homeworld. The irony, lost on her tormentors, was that their ancestors had been fleeing their own predators into underground bunkers while early humans were busy domesticating wolves and inventing agriculture. But evolution had been kinder to the galaxy's civilized species, blessing them with worlds where the most dangerous creature was an occasional herbivore with anger management issues. This fundamental disconnect would prove significant in approximately 47 minutes. The combat facility on Deck 12 had been designed by committee, which explained why it looked like a museum exhibit on how not to build things. Gleaming walls rose 30 feet overhead, interrupted by observation decks where instructors could watch students fail with appropriate academic detachment. The floor plan resembled a maze designed by someone who had heard mazes described but never actually seen one, featuring corridors that led nowhere, rooms that served no tactical purpose, and corners specifically engineered to create confusion. It was, according to the Academy's promotional materials, a sophisticated environment for developing strategic thinking under pressure. In reality, it was a playground for rich kids whose idea of combat experience came from holographic simulations and philosophical discussions about the ethics of warfare. On this particular morning, as Kepler-7's artificial sun began its slow climb across the station's sky dome, Cadet Deathworlder was explaining his brilliant plan to his fellow conspirators with the smug confidence of someone who had never faced actual consequences for his actions. "The Deathworlder thinks she's so superior," he said, adjusting his perfectly pressed uniform with hands that had never held anything more dangerous than an antique plasma stylus. His species, the Centaurans, were known for their strategic minds and their complete inability to understand why anyone would choose physical confrontation over a strongly worded diplomatic note, always scoring higher in combat sims, always volunteering for the dangerous scenarios. It's time someone taught her about real warfare. His audience consisted of Cadet Deathworlder, whose aquatic homeworld had never developed the concept of land-based combat, and Cadet Brendok, a Regellian whose people had achieved peace by breeding aggression out of their species approximately 1,000 years ago. Together, they represented the Academy's finest examples of beings who understood warfare as a theoretical concept, discussed in climate-controlled classrooms. "But the training ammunition," Deathworlder began, her gills fluttering with what might have been nervousness or excitement. Her translator rendered the emotion as mild concern, though the actual sensation was closer to the feeling humans got before riding roller coasters. "Will be replaced with live rounds," Deathworlder finished, producing a small device that looked like a medical scanner but hummed with the particular frequency of military-grade modification equipment. "Standard plasma charges, naturally. Nothing that would cause permanent damage to a normal cadet." The key phrase there was normal cadets. Deathworlder had done his research, consulting the Academy's xenobiology database with the thoroughness of a student cramming for finals. According to the files, humans were remarkably fragile compared to most spacefaring species. Their bones broke easily, their skin tore at the slightest provocation, and their cardiovascular systems could be disrupted by relatively minor trauma. 3 plasma shots, center mass professionally placed, should be more than sufficient to send Cadet Voss to the medical bay with a lesson about respecting her betters. What the xenobiology database failed to mention, primarily because no one had bothered to update it since first contact, was that human physiology came with certain built-in redundancies that evolution had installed during several million years of things trying to eat them. These modifications would prove relevant shortly. Brendok nodded with the enthusiasm of someone whose greatest act of rebellion had been staying up past bedtime. "It's perfect." She enters the facility for her solo exercise, we activate the combat drones with live ammunition, and she learns that Deathworld's savagery is no match for civilized tactics. The beauty of the plan, in their minds, was its elegance. Training accidents happened all the time. Well, not really, but they could happen. The Academy's medical facilities were excellent. Their legal department was better, and their reputation for discretion was legendary. A human cadet injured during a routine exercise would be treated, documented, and quietly transferred to a less demanding program. Problem solved, lesson learned, natural order restored. They had already disabled the facility's safety monitors, replaced the training ammunition in the automated defense systems, and adjusted the scenario parameters to ensure maximum educational value. All that remained was for Kira to arrive for her scheduled solo exercise and learn some humility. As plans went, it was flawless, except for the part where it was completely insane. Kira stepped into the combat facility at exactly 900 hours, because punctuality was one of the few human traits the Academy actually appreciated. She wore standard training gear, adaptive armor that would protect against training weapons, mobility enhancers that would help her navigate the facility's obstacles, and a confidence born from 6 months of proving herself against beings who thought violence was something that happened to other people. The facility's entry portal sealed behind her with a soft hiss that sounded almost apologetic. Somewhere in the observation deck, Deathworlder and his collaborators leaned forward with the anticipation of children about to watch their favorite entertainment program. The first plasma bolt caught Kira in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending her stumbling into the nearest wall. The pain was immediate and extraordinary, the kind of deep burning agony that training weapons were specifically designed not to produce. Her adaptive armor, calibrated for practice ammunition, offered about as much protection as tissue paper against the military-grade plasma charge. The second shot hit her center mass, lifting her off her feet and sending her crashing into a tactical barrier that had been placed there for cover, not structural support. The barrier crumpled under the impact, and Kira's vision went white as her nervous system tried to process damage it wasn't supposed to be experiencing. The third shot was aimed at her head but struck her right thigh instead, as she had managed to roll behind the remains of the barrier. This was fortunate, as a headshot would have ended the exercise permanently and robbed the galaxy of what was about to become a very educational experience. In the observation deck, Deathworlder clapped his hands together with satisfaction. "Excellent marksmanship. She'll be unconscious within moments, and we can call the medical team to—" He stopped talking because Kira Voss was getting back up. This was not supposed to happen. According to every tactical manual, combat simulation and theoretical framework they had studied, a being struck by 3 plasma charges should be incapacitated. The human should be lying on the facility floor, hopefully conscious enough to appreciate the lesson, but certainly unable to continue the exercise. Instead, Kira was rising to her feet with movements that looked less like a wounded cadet and more like something primordial emerging from deep water. Her left arm hung useless. Blood was soaking through her training gear from multiple wounds, and her face had gone pale in a way that made her look less human and more like a predator conserving energy for what came next. "Interesting," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the facility's audio system. The word came out steady, conversational, and absolutely terrifying in its complete lack of emotional inflection. "Live ammunition in a training exercise. That's either a spectacular malfunction or someone just tried to kill me." In the observation deck, 3 alien cadets discovered that their respective species' literature contained very few words for the particular type of fear that came from realizing you had just cornered something that was going to corner you back. Kira looked up at the observation windows, and her smile contained all the warmth of a neutron star. "Given the probability of 3 simultaneous equipment failures, I'm going with option 2. The facility's exit portal had naturally locked itself when the exercise began. Standard safety protocol to prevent cadets from leaving mid-simulation. The portal was a masterwork of engineering, constructed from composite materials that could withstand starship weapons, sealed with magnetic locks that required both biometric confirmation and facility override codes to open. Kira walked up to it, placed her good hand against the doorframe and tore the entire assembly out of the wall. The sound was indescribable. Metal screaming, composites separating, and magnetic locks failing, in a cascade of electronic protests that the facility's designers had never imagined possible. Sparks showered from severed power conduits as a door designed to contain military-grade explosions came apart like wrapping paper in the hands of someone who had apparently missed the memo about human limitations. She tossed the mangled portal aside, all 2 tons of it with the casual indifference of someone discarding an empty food container. "Now then," Kira said, stepping through the ruined doorway and into the corridor beyond, "let's discuss proper training protocols." The Academy's halls, normally filled with the quiet dignity of higher learning, erupted into chaos as 3 alien cadets discovered that their carefully planned lesson in humility had become a seminar in why humans were classified as Deathworlders in the first place. Kira moved through the corridors with the methodical efficiency of someone conducting a performance review, except the performance in question involved attempted murder and the review was being conducted with extreme prejudice. Her injuries, which should have incapacitated any reasonable being, seemed to serve as motivation rather than impediment. Deathworlder, displaying the tactical brilliance that had earned him top marks in theoretical warfare, had decided that the best response to an angry human was to hide in a supply closet and hope she forgot about him. This strategy worked for approximately 30 seconds, which was how long it took Kira to track him down using a combination of scent, sound, and the kind of predatory instincts that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting. The closet door, like the facility portal before it, learned that human engineering tolerances were merely suggestions rather than absolute limits. Deathworlder found himself face to face with someone whose species had climbed to the top of their food chain by being better at violence than everything else on their planet. "Cadet Deathworlder," Kira said pleasantly, as if they had encountered each other in the Academy commissary, rather than in the aftermath of his attempted assassination. "I believe we need to discuss your research methodology." What followed was less a conversation than an educational demonstration on the differences between theoretical combat and its practical application. Deathworlder, whose people had achieved civilization by developing superior intellect and conflict resolution skills, discovered that neither of these advantages were particularly useful when faced with someone who had been raised by a species that considered wrestling with apex predators a recreational activity. The encounter ended with Deathworlder securely fastened to the supply closet ceiling using his own uniform and a creative application of cable management principles. He remained conscious throughout, which Kira considered a professional courtesy. Ylthara, meanwhile, had attempted to reach the Academy's security office, which demonstrated impressive initiative but poor understanding of human persistence. Her aquatic physiology, perfectly adapted for her homeworld's crystal-clear seas, proved less effective in the Academy's terrestrial environment. Kira caught up with her in the central atrium, where a decorative fountain provided the only water feature for 50 meters in any direction. "Oh, good," Kira observed. "You found somewhere to stay hydrated. We're going to be here for a while." The subsequent discussion, conducted while Ylthara clung to the fountain's edge like a very guilty sea creature, covered topics including consent, training safety, and the importance of understanding one's target before attempting to eliminate them. The lesson concluded with Ylthara secured in the fountain using decorative kelp and her own equipment straps, with enough water circulation to keep her comfortable but insufficient mobility to escape. Rennock, displaying the survival instincts that had helped his species achieve peace through evolutionary pacifism, had barricaded himself in the Academy's most secure location, the library. This was tactically sound, as the library featured reinforced walls, multiple emergency communication systems, and enough academic resources to research exactly how badly he had miscalculated. Unfortunately for Brendok, the library also featured large windows designed to provide inspiring views of the cosmos and structural integrity standards that had been established by beings who had never needed to account for motivated humans. Kira arrived at the library via the express route, directly through a third-story window in a shower of crystalline fragments and the sound of composite materials discovering their breaking points. She landed in the philosophy section, which seemed appropriate given the circumstances. "Cadet Brendok," she announced, brushing glass fragments from her training gear with the casual indifference of someone for whom property damage was a minor inconvenience. "I see you've been doing some research." Indeed. Brendok had surrounded himself with every text the library contained on human psychology, physiology, and tactical capabilities. The reading material painted a picture of a species that was, in the words of one particularly alarmed xenobiologist, unnecessarily robust and disturbingly persistent. "I didn't know," Brendok whispered, his voice barely audible above the facility's emergency alarms, which had finally activated in response to the various structural modifications Kira had been making to the Academy's architecture. "The database said humans were fragile, that plasma charges would incapacitate you safely. We never meant to kill me," Kira finished helpfully. "Well, that's reassuring. I suppose the fact that you only intended to cause severe bodily harm makes this whole situation much more civilized." The library's emergency communication system chose that moment to activate, flooding the space with the voice of Academy Commandant Veltros, announcing that all cadets should return to their quarters immediately, while security investigated reports of structural anomalies in the training facilities. Kira looked at the shattered windows she had created, the overturned reading tables, and Brendok cowering behind a display of ancient Rigelian poetry. "I'd say structural anomaly is a fair description." The Academy's response to the crisis demonstrated exactly why the Galactic Republic had managed to maintain peace for 3 centuries. When faced with a problem they didn't understand, they formed a committee to study it. Within an hour of Kira's impromptu renovations, Kepler-7's administrative center buzzed with officials, security personnel, and enough bureaucrats to populate a small moon. Commandant Veltros, a distinguished Altarian whose previous military experience consisted primarily of ribbon-cutting ceremonies and graduation speeches, found himself facing a situation that hadn't been covered in any leadership manual. His academy, his pristine, prestigious academy, looked like someone had decided to redecorate using industrial equipment and creative anger management. The initial reports had seemed absurd. A human cadet had torn doors from their frames, climbed through windows, and systematically tracked down 3 fellow students who had apparently tried to murder her during a training exercise. The damage estimates alone would require an emergency budget appropriation, and the political implications were staggering. "Sir," reported Chief Security Officer Nexavara, whose species had evolved from prey animals and consequently excelled at identifying threats. We've contained the situation. Cadet Voss is currently in Conference Room Alpha with the 3 cadets involved in the incident. Contained? Veltros asked, reviewing damage reports that read like casualty assessments from a natural disaster. She destroyed half the training facility, reconstructed our library's architecture, and apparently used our water features as detention cells. How exactly is that contained? Well, sir, she stopped. This was technically accurate. After securing her 3 attackers in various locations throughout the academy, Kira had calmly walked to the administration center, knocked politely on the door, and requested a meeting with the commandant to discuss what she described as irregularities in academy training protocols. She was currently sitting in Conference Room Alpha, bleeding quietly onto the academy's finest furniture, while waiting for someone in authority to acknowledge that attempted murder was generally considered inappropriate behavior. The political ramifications were extraordinary. The Terran Integration Initiative was a cornerstone of recent diplomatic efforts, designed to demonstrate the Republic's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Having the first human cadet nearly assassinated by her classmates would create diplomatic tensions that could take decades to resolve. Having that same cadet respond by systematically dismantling Academy infrastructure while hunting down her attackers would create the kind of headlines that ended careers. Sir, Nexian continued, consulting his security tablet with the expression of someone reading his own obituary. There's also the matter of the evidence. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and automatically recorded by the Academy's own systems. Security footage showed the 3 conspirators modifying training equipment, accessing restricted ammunition supplies, and celebrating what they clearly believed would be their victims' incapacitation. The forensic analysis of the combat facility confirmed live ammunition in systems designed for training rounds. Even the Academy's legal department, renowned for their ability to make problems disappear, admitted that prosecution would be unavoidable. And the media response, Veltros asked. Though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic, the Galactic News Network is calling it Deathworld Justice in Action. The Centauran Diplomatic Corps has requested a formal investigation. The Regalian Embassy is demanding to know why their citizens aren't safe in Republic educational institutions, and the Terran ambassador... Nexvara paused, consulting his notes. The Terran ambassador said, and I quote, "We told you they were tough, but apparently you needed a demonstration." The irony was almost poetic. The academy that had grudgingly accepted one human student to prove their enlightened attitudes had instead provided the galaxy with a comprehensive lesson in why certain species earned reputations for violence. The 3 cadets who had intended to humble their Deathworld classmate had succeeded only in demonstrating why humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. "What does she want?" Veltros finally asked, because dealing with an angry human was preferable to dealing with the inevitable bureaucratic nightmare that would follow. "Justice, sir, and what she describes as administrative reforms to prevent future training accidents." The requested reforms, when delivered, were surprisingly reasonable. Enhanced safety protocols for training exercises, mandatory cultural sensitivity training for cadets from non-Deathworld species, and regular equipment inspections to prevent unauthorized modifications. She also suggested that the Academy's xenobiology database might benefit from more recent research on human capabilities. The 3 conspirators, meanwhile, faced expulsion, criminal charges, and the lasting distinction of being the first cadets in Academy history to require medical treatment after attempting to discipline a classmate. Their families' legal teams were already preparing statements about temporary insanity and cultural misunderstandings. 6 months later, Cadet Kira Voss graduated from the Zephian Military Academy with highest honors, specialized commendations for tactical innovation, and a reputation that had spread throughout the galactic military establishment. Her senior thesis on asymmetric warfare in multi-species environments became required reading at military academies across 3 sectors. The academy itself underwent significant reforms, including new safety protocols, updated cultural awareness programs, and a completely rebuilt training facility that featured more robust construction standards. Enrollment applications from human candidates increased by 3,000%, though the acceptance rate remained selective. Dex Lorth, Yilthara, and Brendok were expelled from the academy and faced criminal prosecution for attempted murder. Their legal proceedings became a case study in interspecies law, diplomatic complications, and the importance of understanding your target before attempting to eliminate them. None of them pursued military careers afterward. The Terran Integration Initiative expanded dramatically, with human officers welcomed into positions throughout the galactic military structure. The phrase Deathworlder diplomacy entered common usage, typically referring to negotiations where one party had significantly underestimated the other's capability. And in the Academy's Hall of Honor, a new plaque commemorated the importance of accurate xenobiological data in maintaining interspecies harmony. Below it, a small display case contained fragments of the original training facility door with a simple inscription: "Structural integrity is relative." The galaxy had learned an important lesson about assumptions, classifications, and the dangers of underestimating beings from worlds where evolution had prioritized survival over civilization. They had also learned that humans, despite their reputation for violence, were remarkably reasonable when treated with basic respect and professional courtesy. They were significantly less reasonable when shot 3 times during training exercises. The ripple effects continued for years afterward. Military doctrine across 12 sectors was quietly revised to account for what strategists euphemistically termed enhanced human performance parameters. The Altarian War College introduced mandatory courses on Deathworld psychology, while Centauran diplomatic academies began teaching their students the fine art of not accidentally declaring war on species that could bench press their starships. Perhaps most tellingly, the Galactic Military Personnel Classification System underwent its first major revision in 2 centuries. The term Deathworlder was quietly retired from official documentation, replaced with the more diplomatically palatable high-gravity adapted species. The change fooled no one, but it made bureaucrats feel better about themselves, which was apparently important for some reason. Kira herself became something of a celebrity, though she handled fame with the same practical efficiency she had demonstrated while redecorating the academy. Recruitment offers poured in from every major military organization in the galaxy, along with endorsement deals, book contracts, and at least 17 marriage proposals from beings whose understanding of human mating rituals was charmingly inaccurate. She accepted a commission with the Republic Fleet as a tactical specialist, where her unique perspective on problem-solving proved invaluable during negotiations with hostile species. Her mere presence at diplomatic tables had a remarkably calming effect on potential adversaries, who seemed to develop sudden interests in peaceful resolution, rather than testing her patience further. The Academy itself became an unlikely pilgrimage site for military historians studying what scholars dubbed the Door Incident. The rebuilt training facility featured reinforced construction that could theoretically withstand determined humans, though no one was particularly eager to test this hypothesis. The new safety protocols were so comprehensive that training accidents became virtually impossible, much to the relief of insurance companies throughout the sector. Commander Veltros, surprisingly, kept his position and even received commendations for his handling of the crisis. His post-incident reforms were held up as models of adaptive leadership, though privately he admitted to colleagues that his primary qualification for the job had been his ability to recognize when he was completely out of his depth and needed to listen to someone who wasn't. The 3 former conspirators eventually found employment in various civilian sectors, though their names remain synonymous with spectacularly poor judgment throughout military circles. Dexlorth became a logistics coordinator for a shipping company, where his strategic planning skills were safely confined to cargo manifests. Yilthara joined her family's aquaculture business, spending her days among creatures that couldn't tear doors off their hinges. Brendok entered academic research, specializing in theoretical xenobiology with a particular focus on species he was unlikely to encounter in person. But then again, as any competent xenobiologist could have told them, that was precisely why humans were classified as Deathworlders in the first place. Some species achieved civilization through superior intellect, others through advanced technology, and still others through diplomatic excellence. Humans had achieved it by being exceptionally difficult to kill and remarkably creative about returning the favor when someone tried.